Okay, so you finally have a revocable living trust. Number one, you're awesome. Congratulations. Everybody needs one. And number two, this is one of the most, if not the most important parts of your foundational estate planning. So again, you're awesome. Way to go. Now that you have one, how often should you review it? How often should you amend it? And what should you look for when you do it? So today we're going to talk about how often to review it, what you should look for when you review it, and how often should you do that with an attorney. Okay, so number one, I recommend that you review it at least once a year. Now, you don't need an attorney necessarily to do that, but just put it in your calendar, maybe an automatic reminder for you to read through your trust every year, because I want you to remember what's in there. It's important for you to know what you've created, how it works, and what it does, and if you still want it that way. So here are 3 things that you should look for when you review your trust. Number one, I want you to look at the fiduciaries. Now, what in the world is a fiduciary? That's your successor trustee. Now, you also have fiduciaries in other documents like your will or your power of attorney or your living will or your healthcare directive, where you nominate somebody to step in and act as your agent under power of attorney or so on. But in this case, we're talking about the trustee, the successor trustee of your trust. You want to review that and make sure that the person that you've named as the successor trustee is the person that you still want to be there. If you don't, that means it's time to make an update. You want to amend your trust to change the successor trustee. Now, at the same time, you might also amend that for your other documents as well, your will or your power of attorney. So number one, check the fiduciaries and see if that's still how you want it. Number two, you want to review your assets. When you set up your trust to begin with, a lot of that was based around what your assets are. You have a home, you've got life insurance policies, accounts, retirement accounts, and so on, maybe business ownership, and we wanted to get those titled appropriately. Those are either titled in the trust or named the trust as the pay on death beneficiary or something like that. So if assets have changed over the years, you've sold your home and bought a new one, is it titled in the trust like it should be? Or is your new life insurance policy naming the appropriate beneficiary, which in most cases should be the trust? So we want to check these things, new assets, make sure everything's titled the way it should be. So the second thing you need to look at, the assets, and are they titled the way they should be? Third is we want to look at the dispositive provisions of the trust, your inheritance plan. How does the trust split up the assets and among whom when you die? So you want to look at that, see if that still matches what you want, and is it what you wanted to begin with? So number one, you want to understand it. How are the assets divided among your children upon your death? And have you changed your mind? Are there new people that you want it to go to? You want to give it to charity now. You want to exclude one of your children. You want to give something to the grandkids first and then the rest of the kids. However you want, you should look that over. And if it's not the way that you want it, make some changes. Okay, now, kind of like your car, every so often, you need to change the oil, right? But you don't need to do that every week. But periodically, it needs some maintenance there. You need to service your vehicle. Well, your trust is a little bit like that. So, like I told you, check the oil once a year, read your trust. But every couple of years, I'd say every 2 or 3 years, it's a good idea to meet with your attorney to do that review. Now, that might not mean that you have to make any changes to it. It just means that you're taking the time to review it with your attorney. Now, your attorney, the way I do it, I'm going to review those same 3 things that I just told you to look for. Number one, review the fiduciaries. Who are your trustees? Number 2, I'm going to look at the assets. And number 3, I'm going to look at the dispositive provisions, the inheritance plan, and talk that through with you. Now, one of the advantages you have with an attorney is they're going to be able to ask you those questions, and you're going to be able to ask your questions to figure out, well, why is it this way? What do we need to do and why are we doing it? Why does the trust work that way? And are there any, and then fourth, one of the things that I'm going to do is talk about with you, are there any changes in laws that might affect your trust and your plan, and evaluate if there's any changes that need to happen there. So again, I don't charge anything when a client comes in to have a review appointment to review the planning that we've put together. Now, if there's any changes that we'll make, now that might bear a fee, and I usually quote a flat fee for that. But depending on your attorney, who you're working with, maybe there's a fee for the review and maybe there's not. But every couple of years, I think it's a good idea to review it with an attorney so this just doesn't get old and stale, and then ends up not working the way that you want it to. So let's review those things that you need to review. Once a year, review your trust on your own. If you want an attorney to help you do that, awesome. They're happy to help. Every 2 to 3-ish years, you should review it probably with your attorney. And the 3 major things we're going to look at are your fiduciaries, successor trustees. We're going to look at the assets, make sure they're titled properly, and we're going to look at the inheritance plan, the dispositive provisions. An attorney will help look at if there's any laws that have changed that might affect your trust. Now, this is for your revocable living trust. If anyone has an irrevocable trust, those have different implications and consequences, and you might want to review that at least annually with your attorney. So keep that in mind. I hope this was helpful, and if you review it, you won't be sorry.